All that and more coming up. First Take in the house. Let's go.
I want to be the best in the world at what I do. I wake up every morning with this desire, this passion, this focus, understanding that it's a process. You know, I want to be one of the all-time greats.
Let's go, fellas, let's go. All day today.
I want to be remembered, you know.
When did you first hear the phrase, let Russ cook?
I've been cooking for some years now. Game, set, match!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into First Take on this Feel Good Friday. Wait, hold up. Forget let Russ cook. This is let LA Steve cook. Stephen A. Smith, Superfly today. I like this.
Thank you so
Stephen,
much.
LA it's working with you.
I like it too.
You just seem like a happier person out there on the West Coast. I like this. This is cool. I'm into it.
He's on the
I'm
West
into
Coast
this.
for 2 weeks, shows up, no tie, collar up. 2 weeks is all it took.
You look good. You look good, Stephen A. You do.
It's stylish.
Yeah, you look about 20 years younger. All right, producers are getting mad at me. According to Adam Schefter, Russell Wilson has told the Seahawks that he wants to play in Seattle, but if a trade were considered, the only teams he would consider going to, get ready for this, Stephen A., the Cowboys, the Saints, the Raiders, and the Bears. So, Max, serious cities right there where he could really, make his mark. Do you think Russ should stay or go?
I think he should stay. I mean, he's made his mark in Seattle. And by the way, they put a good team around him. Not a great team every year, but a good one. Better than most. Like, better than the team that the Dallas Cowboys field normally. Better than the team that the Raiders field normally. Better than the team that the Bears field normally. Saints are something else, but actually comparable. How many Super Bowls did Drew Brees win in his career? One. Well, Russell Wilson's been to more than that and won one. Look, going into this last season, I liked Seattle to win the NFC after the Jamal Adams trade. Jamal Adams got hurt. You knew it was like a hopefully bend but don't break defense, and then you add an elite piece like Adams. You think maybe that could put him over the top. Didn't work out that way. It was a bend and break defense, and Jamal Adams was hurt, and they really could never get it together on that side of the ball. But there was reason to think maybe they could. They tried to address it in a big way by bringing Adams in. Does Russell Wilson have weapons in Seattle? Oh, my God, yeah. He's got a great receiving core to throw to. Does he have an offensive line? And he threw his offensive line under the bus when he made those comments initially about how often he was hitting everything. Let me say this. Seattle was arrogant with their offensive line. Several years back, the Max Unger for Jimmy Graham trade, they trade a real good offensive lineman for a tight end who's more like a wide receiver, thinking they'll improve that way and they can just kind of draft linemen later on and coach them up. Didn't work out that way. They were unable to develop a line. And a couple of years ago, Stephen A., I was really concerned for Russell Wilson. But I've seen more resources devoted to the line since then. And I actually don't think it's the same problem that it was a couple of years ago. I think it's trending in the right direction. And Stephen A., you know what's curious to me when I look at his list of teams? How's the Bears O-line? It's horrible. Bears O-line is terrible last year. That was really the problem with the Bears. Well, I mean, the Cowboys' offensive line was great not long ago. It ain't the same anymore. This is not your slightly older cousin's Cowboys' offensive line. It's a new day. So it's curious to me the teams he selected that he would approve a trade to.
Well, not all of them are that curious to me. A couple of things that we need to get out of the way. Number one, if you're Russell Wilson, here's why the Dallas Cowboys would be on your list. It's called comfort, Max Kellerman. So let me get this straight. You could be mediocre, miss the playoffs more times than you make them over the last quarter century, and still be relevant and still make dollars because you're still in the spotlight. That's not a bad deal for a football player. So let's take that into consideration because that would be one of the reasons why they would want to be a Cowboy. It certainly ain't because they're winning. That's number one. Number two, when we think about Russell Wilson in terms of whether or not he should stay or go, if he wants to go, he should go. The reality of the situation is this is a champion. This is a guy that's going to 2 Super Bowls. This is a guy that's been the star and carried the franchise on his back for at least the last 5 years. And when you look at some of the things that are transpiring, the man's been sacked 394 times in his career. That's one of the top 2 in terms of being sacked. He's been hit over 1,100 times. And this is the star of your franchise who's been basically abused in that regard. And he walks into a room and he tries to make suggestions onto how you can avoid avoid getting him hit more often, and you literally let him walk out of the room disgusted because you dismissed him, that's very, very disrespectful, and that's the kind of thing that should make him say, I want the hell up out of here. Now, in terms of the teams that he should go to, let me say this to you. Easily for me, it's the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints, although their offensive line needs to be improved a little bit, their defense has improved vastly over the years. Michael Thomas is an all-world receiver. All right. Alvin Kamara is an all-world player. All right. So when you look at it from that standpoint, and you've got those two cornerstones as a part of your franchise, with Sean Payton calling plays, and then you've got a backup like a guy like Taysom Hill that would be in the mix that you could utilize, with run options and things of that nature, read options. The bottom line is that you can find a way to be productive, efficient, winning football games while also insulating Russell Wilson from the level of abuse that he's been accustomed to experiencing in Seattle. I think the Saints are an easy call here. I don't think the Cowboys should be a part of the mix. I don't think the Raiders are ready yet. They shouldn't be a part of the mix, even though obviously I think Russell Wilson would take the Raiders to the playoffs. I think the Bears obviously is something that you can't dismiss because of their defense and playing in Chi-Town. The fact of the matter is they could do some things with Russell Wilson as well, but the ideal landing spot for him would be the New Orleans Saints. They're in the Dome. Drew Brees is probably going to retire. Sean Payton is still there. Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara is still there, and the defense is vastly improved, and they are accustomed to winning their damn selves. I think it's easy to surmise that the Saints would be the ideal landing spot for Russell Wilson based on the list that he gave.
Of the teams that he listed, apparently that was reported that he would approve a trade to, it's easily the Saints for the reasons you just mentioned, not to mention Emmanuel Sanders, and they're a very well-balanced team, and he'd have a real shot to win the Super Bowl. But I think he has a real shot to win the Super Bowl in Seattle. The defense was really the issue this year to me, much more than the offensive line. And by the way, if Russell Wilson is tired of getting chased around and hit, he's got to get rid of the ball a little quicker, too. Like, that's actually a fair criticism of Russell Wilson. No one's perfect. He's great. But he holds the ball a little. Let Russ cook. A lot of that is, keeping his eyes down the field, evading defenders, and coming up with the big play one way or another. But there are consequences to that. So I wouldn't deny that the Saints are a great landing spot for him, but I think he's in an excellent spot where he is. In terms of the Cowboys, Stephen A., I got to say, the lower expectations, you can be mediocre, that ain't for Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson wants to be the best ever. He's intensely competitive. That's why I'm curious about the Cowboys. For a guy who wants input, I don't know, you think you're going to get it with the Cowboys? For a guy who wants an offensive line, Cowboys don't have that anymore. And for a guy who wants to win Super Bowls, when was the last time the Cowboys even really been seriously in the hunt for one? That's why I'm surprised at the list. It seems incongruous. The Saints make sense for the points you bring up. Why do the Raiders make sense? Why do the Cowboys make sense? And what do they have in common, really? I don't get it.
Well, listen, here's what I would say to you. I mean, you can look at it from that perspective, and I get where you're coming from, but here's the part that I think you're missing. It's similar to Deshaun Watson. There's something that, it's connected to football, but it transcends football to such a degree. Why all of a sudden would Russell Wilson have this attitude? You've disrespected him. It's not about the football team. I understand what your point. Your points about the football team are valid. As far as I'm concerned, Seattle Seahawks are a playoff team. They can contend for a Super Bowl. We get all of that. DK Metcalf is there with Lockett and those boys. Of course they can contend for a Super Bowl. And Pete Carroll's coaching them, and we know he's a damn good coach. He's a championship coach. My point, however, is if Russell Wilson feels this way, you have done something to disrespect him. And so I think that's the question. That really listen, and let's call this what it is. All right, let me ruffle some feathers. Not that I give a damn, but let me be very, very clear about this. Dak Prescott, his contract situation. It's not about the money. It's that we want you for more years and all of this other stuff. Every other organization in the NFL understands you got to take care of your quarterback. Jerry Jones is taking care of everybody else but his quarterback. Deshaun Watson, Houston. He feels signs $160 million, over $100 million guaranteed over 4 years, crying, with gratitude because of what the Houston Texans did in terms of investing in him and showing their faith and trust in him, et cetera, et cetera. Less than a year later, he wants nothing to do with them. In a league rife with parity, mind you, you can stink one year and be a contender the very next in the National Football League. That's what makes it so special. Now we have a situation with Russell Wilson, who's been there for years, who's gone to 2 Super Bowls, who's won a Super Bowl title, who's been a model citizen, who's carried the franchise on his back, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sorry, is it just me? I'm seeing 3 black quarterbacks feeling disrespected. Is it just me? Nope. Is it just me?
Let me just add one thing to that, Stephen A., that I find interesting. Max, let me jump in here really quick, because when we're talking about Russell Wilson and we're talking about Deshaun Watson, besides the fact that they're both black quarterbacks, they both have taken a lot of hits, and they haven't been protected at the line. That's another piece that hasn't been mentioned. And Max,
and they're big time,
when you say, I don't get what's... Yeah, and also, Max, when you said, I don't get what's in common, I do. These are all major cities with solid football teams. He's picking major markets.
Yeah, I don't know, but he's left off a lot of bigger markets than the ones he's included. And I wouldn't say all of them are really solid football teams. Actually, I think the Dallas Cowboys have a lot of problems. I think the Raiders are solid. I think the Saints are excellent. And there was one more that's slipping my mind right now.
Bears.
And the Bears have a defense, but they have no offensive line. Like, if he's worried about getting chased around, oh, my God. Let me say something about what you brought up, Stephen A. I think you're right. I think there's that component to it. And I also think this is one of the reasons for so many years the owners have tried to stand on principle and even sometimes hurt themselves to prove a point to labor, to prove a point to the players, like Le'Veon Bell. Yeah, we want you back, but hey, we'll lose you to prove a point, right? And the point is now that franchise quarterbacks, if you are a